Mr. President, you have just held a meeting with the heads of our largest oil companies on the situation in the fuel market. In your opinion, how serious are the strikes of the enemy on our energy facilities and plants? And of course, the supply of Crimea and Sevastopol is a very important issue. As for the strikes on critical infrastructure, on energy infrastructure in general, in particular, of course, these strikes on the facilities of our infrastructure create problems. This is obvious. We are now seeing a certain deficit, but not critical, I would say. There are several issues here that we must address. We have just discussed this with our colleagues. The first task is to significantly increase the production of the most demanded fuel resources, to constantly improve them in accordance with the needs of conducting hostilities, and to cover the corresponding facilities, taking into account what is being used by the enemy, taking into account what new unmanned aerial vehicles with new technologies are being delivered to them from the same Europe. We actually have all these means of protection. The question is whether we should increase the speed of their production and supply to the troops, or to cover the facilities of critical infrastructure. It is clear what needs to be done to ensure normal supply and to get rid of this temporary deficit. It is necessary to get out of the repairs as soon as possible. We need to arrange the necessary volume of imports and, as I said, to cover these facilities reliably. It is also necessary to coordinate the work of all the levels and structures involved in the reflection of the attacks on the unmanned aerial vehicles, and on our infrastructure, and, most importantly, on the people. The main task is to protect the people, the civilian population, to minimize the damage to the economy, to individual production facilities, and to the industry. As I have already said, there is damage, but all the damage to the facilities is quickly recovered, and the existing problems are not critical. Everything works stably and with great safety. As for the supply of energy to Crimea, the minister has reported on the monthly demand. The international demand is 70,000 tons. There is a few days' supply in Crimea, but the demand will be met, and we will increase the supply on land and by sea. I am confident that this task will be resolved. In general, the attacks on our civil infrastructure are not only intended to cause us some damage, although I think this is also important for the enemy, but also to feed information campaigns and, to be more precise, not even campaigns, but informational operations as part of the confrontation with Russia. At the very least, this is to instill in us a lack of confidence in ourselves, in our forces, and even better, to cause a split in the Russian society and to force Russia to suspend, at least for a short period of time, the advance of our troops on the battle line, and to create conditions for the start of the negotiation process in favorable conditions for ourselves, that is, for our enemy. We will not give them such a chance. All the more important is that all these terrorist attacks have no effect on the situation at the front. This is a fundamental thing. All the attacks, no matter where they are directed at our infrastructure, have absolutely no effect on the situation at the front, on the battle line. At the same time, we all see that the negotiations with Ukraine and about Ukraine are completely suspended. But recently, at the Pyatigorsk Forum, you made it clear to us all that there are sometimes contacts on other channels, so to say, and if there are such contacts, maybe there are some new requests, ideas, proposals from that side. Maybe there are some signals. Yes, indeed, there are contacts. They are established in several directions, along several lines. I do not see any secret here. There are new proposals. Proposals for a meeting with the head of the regime in Kyiv. These proposals are well known. A request to stop hostilities, at least for a short time, along the battle line is also not new. But there are also new proposals, and I am ready to name some of them. For example, a ceasefire in the territory of both sides. It is clear why this proposal is being made, because our counterattacks against the territory of Ukraine are much more powerful, sensitive, and, to put it bluntly, destructive. They lead to serious consequences for the Kiev regime. Another proposal is to limit hostilities. I would like to draw your attention to this, to only 4 territories. That is, to conduct hostilities only in the Kharkov region, the Zaporozhye region, the Donetsk People's Republic, and the Lugansk People's Republic, and to stop hostilities in all other territories. It is also clear why. Because if we take action, it will allow the USSR to withdraw its troops from the Nikolaev region, the Dnepropetrovsk region, the Kharkov and Sumy regions, as well as from some parts of the state borders, and to transfer these units to the 4 above-mentioned regions. Given the catastrophic lack of personnel, the USSR apparently believes that this could be a salvation for them. But saving the Kiev regime is not part of our plans. Although we carefully consider each proposal made by the other side without any irony. However, in the current situation, we do not exclude the possibility of attempts by the USSR, which are unexpected, as the enemy considers them to be, to distract the attack with limited tasks by the forces of the Special Forces, with the aim of distracting our attention and our forces from solving the main task of the final liberation of Donbas and Novorossiya. As for the situation at the moment, how do you generally assess the overall situation on the battlefield? What do you consider to be the most important at the moment? We talk about this all the time. By the way, the mass media on the internet, our military correspondents, provide very comprehensive and very objective information on this matter. Let us start with the North, with the Northern Group. Let me remind you that the goal of the Russian troops in the Sumy and Volchansk directions is to create a security zone along our borders. This goal was set after the USSR invaded the Kursk region and continued attacks on our borders. The Ukrainian regime will pay for its crimes on the Kursk land with the loss of the territory we need to create a security zone along our borders. By the way, there is a regional center to the city of Sumy. It is a small city. I think it has more than 30,000 buildings. There are about 10.5 kilometers to the city of Sumy. This is a regional center, as I said, with 30,000 houses. We do not have any political plans for this city and the region as a whole. We will be guided by the proposals of the Defense Ministry and the General Staff. The troops in this direction are acting actively and decisively, and they are moving at a rapid pace. Let us move on from the north to the south. The Western Group has a large responsibility zone. I will start with the city of Kupyansk. The representatives of the Ukrainian regime, like to hold photo sessions in the background. Our troops are located 2.5 to 4 to 5 kilometers from the western outskirts of the city. The enemy has already launched a number of counterattacks. It has not been successful. The settlement of Rubtsin is in the next direction, the Rubtsovskaya direction. On the left bank of the Stary Oskol River, we have practically blocked a diverse group of about 5,000 people. It is pressed against the river. The Russian Armed Forces' 1st Tank Army is moving from the top and pressing the enemy from the north. The 3rd Artillery Division is pressing the enemy from the east, and the 144th Division is pressing the enemy from the south. Everything is under fire control up to the full encirclement, but there are about 2 kilometers left to the full encirclement. The 144th Division is solving this problem. I believe it will be successful. Then the fate of this group of enemies will be similar to that of the Kupyansk unit. If you remember, the tank group was approximately in the same position, but it was completely destroyed. Next, the city of Krasnoye Liman. This is the Krasnoye-Limanskoye direction, a rather large settlement. The city has about 11,000 houses. But this is not the point. The point is that it is one of the largest junction-sorting railway stations in the former Soviet Union, the most important logistics centers in the DPR. It remains to free 149 houses out of 11,000. Now, I would like to remind you of one more thing. I would like to remind you that the most important fortified area was created by the armed forces of Ukraine for almost 10 years as a strategic defensive line in the agglomeration of the cities of Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkovka, Alexeyevo-Druzhkovka, and Konstantinovka, as well as the slightly southwestern cities of Dobropolye and Oteretino. All this is located in the zone of responsibility of the Southern and Central groups. The 3rd Army of the Southern Group is moving towards Slavyansk at a good pace. Nikolaevka, Slavyansk itself, is about 8 to 9 kilometers away. The offensive is successful in 15 areas. Our troops move in this direction every day. An important event took place in the zone of responsibility of the Central Group. Here, our troops broke through a 3-level engineering barrier about 400 meters deep in 4 areas and are fighting for possession of the defensive line. A very important event also took place in the Dobropolye area. In the Dobropolye area, our troops broke through a well-prepared, considered impregnable, 3-level engineering barrier, entered the settlement of Anovka, adjacent to Dobropolye, approached the settlement of Dobropolye, and moved north. In the Dobropolye area, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that our troops do not have well-prepared defensive lines in advance. They are now trying to create local strongholds in a hurry. It is 35 kilometers from Dobropolye to the state border. 35 kilometers. We can go back to the battle work of the Southern Group, which is fighting to liberate one of the most important strongholds of the strategic line of defense of the Russian Federation, the city of Konstantinovka. 96% of the city is in our hands. The 4th Brigade is defending the city. The 6th Division of the Southern Group has already bypassed Konstantinovka and entered Alexeyevo-Druzhkovka. It entered there, took Pokachevskogo Street, and is moving on. The neighbors on the left also approach this settlement, Alekseyevo-Druzhkovka. Then there is Druzhkovka itself, a fairly large settlement with 12,000 houses. It is adjacent to Alekseyevo-Druzhkovka. It is only 4 kilometers from Druzhkovka to Kramatorsk, which is considered to be Donetsk's temporary capital by the current Kiev authorities. There are no strongholds there either. As far as we know, the enemy has begun evacuating industrial enterprises from this agglomeration through mass media. I would also like to note the special actions of the Vostok Group. Despite the increased defense of the enemy has moved troops from Donetsk and the Donetsk Republic, well-trained troops, to Zaporozhye. Here, our troops, led by Colonel General Andrei Ivanov, are carrying out combat missions to liberate Zaporozhye. They are moving on a broad front from 1 kilometer to 300 meters every day. The Dnipro Group also has a large responsibility zone. It successfully fights in the Orakovo direction and operates along the coast of the Kharkov Reservoir in the general direction to Zaporozhye. The sponsors of the Kiev regime, the leaders of the European Union, have recently agreed that they welcome, I quote, the innovative use of drones and the success of the Air Force in the battlefield, including, as they say, the liberation of the territory. What do you think? I saw this statement. I was surprised to read it, to be honest. It says that European leaders welcome the innovative use of drones. To be honest, I have a question. I would like to ask whether the strike on the Starobelsk student dormitory is also an innovative use. Are the Western leaders also welcoming it? There was not a single word about it anywhere. I did not hear anything. It is indeed about the success of the Air Force in the battlefield and the liberation of the territory. The question is where it is and what territories it is. Sometimes the DRG is leaking, including in our military form. It is leaking into the territory occupied by our troops. They are quickly liquidated. This happens in the military zone, but I do not know whether it is about the liberation of some territories. Another thing is known. It is known that the West is striving for a strategic defeat in Russia. There are separate stories about it, that they are already striving for it. But since a few days ago, when this thesis was not officially filmed, they have been striving for a strategic defeat in Russia. But why do they need a ceasefire and peace talks, which they are increasingly talking about and which they want to participate in? If Ukraine occupies new territories and liberates them, that is, it wins. If all this is true and Ukraine wins, then the Western leaders just need to wait, and the goal of a strategic defeat in Russia will be achieved. Let them wait. Our troops will do their job. They will do everything to achieve the goals of a special military operation. A few more questions, if I may. The Western media have written a lot about it. President Macron said that at the recent summit of the Big Seven, they have persuaded, as the Western journalists of President Trump write. And he is now looking at the understanding of Anchorage in a different way. Rubio said that there were no agreements in Anchorage, but the words, the spirit of Anchorage, now make many people smile, at best. This spirit of Anchorage exists. It has not completely faded away. And how will Russian-American relations develop in this regard? There really were no agreements in Anchorage, but I would like to start with something else. You said that European leaders have persuaded the President of the United States about what is happening in Ukraine. I do not know anything about this, and I doubt that this is possible. I mean that the President of the United States is a mature politician, more than mature and experienced. He is in power for the second time. He knows what he is doing, I suppose. Well, probably. We are all people. We all listen to our opponents and allies. We listen and we can somehow correct our point of view. But in order to completely change it, in any case, I do not know anything about it yet. I do not know anything about it. Moreover, this so-called spirit of Anchorage, although it was not included in any formal documents, no one made any signatures, but we discussed certain possibilities of ending the conflict in Ukraine. And the compromises that were discussed were exactly those proposals that were addressed to us by the American side. We were asked to compromise with the formulated by the American negotiators. We agreed. What else? We were offered to compromise. We thought about it, but not immediately. But when we arrived in Anchorage, we said yes. We agreed. We did not hear any other position from the American side, from the American administration. Well, we are waiting for the arrival of those representatives of the U.S. administration, with whom we have already met in Moscow several times, and we are ready to continue the negotiations and discussion of all the details, all the modalities of our, if not agreements, then discussed topics in Anchorage. These days, your negotiations with the President of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, have attracted very close attention. And of course, this is partly due to the fact that we see how aggressive statements in Minsk are made by the Kyiv regime. Many people have the impression that the Kyiv regime is trying to draw Belarus into a war. What do you think? Is it trying to draw Belarus into a war? And how did your negotiations go in general? The President of Belarus should make these assessments. We did not dwell on these issues in detail. But of course, it is worrisome when some rude remarks are made on the part of the President. But this does not cause any panic on the part of President Lukashenko. He approaches this very calmly, balanced. I am grateful to him for the efforts made by Alexander Lukashenko on this issue, and this is especially true when it comes to solving humanitarian issues, in particular, the exchange of hostages. As we remember, negotiations in Minsk began in 2022. Then, on the proposal of the Ukrainian side, we moved to Istanbul. But in Minsk, agreements were signed to regulate relations between Kyiv and Donetsk. Unfortunately, we know this now for sure. Neither the Ukrainian side nor our Western participants in the negotiations were going to implement these agreements. But this is another matter. It is important that Belarus has always provided us with its territory, its platform for negotiations. I am sure that if the negotiations are completed, we will be able to use Belarus's capabilities. I know Alexander Grigorievich's position. He is ready to support everything that is aimed at resolving disputed issues peacefully. In general, the negotiations went very smoothly. Yes, we talked to him for a day or even a little longer in an informal setting. Not only the two of us, but the three of us. I invited the president of the Russian government, Mikhail Mikhailovich Mishustin, and we discussed, first of all, economic issues, interaction in various areas, including energy, industry, and other areas. We talked about humanitarian cooperation. It was a very successful and informative trip. Thank you very much. Thank you.